Right, hello viewers. I'm just going to talk off the cuff about this city, which is the newest city I made in City Skylines. There's a new update that just came out at the new DLC that the thing I want most from it is the intercity bus, the intercity bus feature, but I haven't gotten around to buying it yet, so this is just the updated game without the newest DLC. Um, so like with most of my designs, we start out with just a completely flat area, which is, it's boring and um, easy, which is the reason why I made this custom map, because it's not that I don't like mountains and stuff. They're just much harder to work with, and it's, for example, mountain freeways. There's just no way to create them using the tools provided in the vanilla game. And also prefab components don't work well with with any terrain change at all. So that's why I always start with a flat map. So the concept of this city is, as with all my cities, so before I get into this particular city, but with all my cities, there's a shared theme. There's lots of repetition of prefab parts. I mean, we just want to see how each of my cities will be primarily made to test out maybe a single concept. So there's a lot of prefab parts involved. I don't want to spend time micromanaging each small part of the city, which is why I use a lot of prefab parts. A common theme in this city is in all my city skylines cities is that is the use of minimalist infrastructure. So as you can see here, we are currently, it's nighttime. There's not a street light to be found. I don't like street lights, even though they are important for safety in real life, but in the game, I just don't use them. We also don't have traffic lights. Mostly they're just inefficient. And yeah, so this city lacks street lights and it doesn't have traffic lights. And I achieved this by editing the road in the asset editor to delete the lights from the road and save it as a new road. Another thing that I do to change the vanilla assets to my liking is that I'll widen the roads. Now, these roads, the lane markings are still in their original spacing, but I've changed the position of the lanes so that the cars aren't so close together. So that also makes things feel a bit more realistic. And realism is very important to me. Like not in terms of like everything is realistic, but just in terms of like cars driving at realistic speeds. Well, this is a bit slow, but driving at speeds that aren't crazy for like not to fling themselves around curves, around turns. And I also really don't like seeing collisions between cars and other cars, between cars and people. So those are things I'll try to avoid, which is why there are some designs that I'll avoid doing that could work in real life, but I'll avoid doing in the sim simply because the game doesn't support those designs fully. Now, the mods I use in my standard portfolio of mods, always, traffic manager, I've always said that it should be just an official DLC that's supported on day one, so that, like for example, with the newest update, it broke Traffic Manager, and so there's now a new version of Traffic Manager that you as the player have to uninstall the old Traffic Manager and then subscribe to the new version, because the old version, I guess whoever was maintaining the old version no longer wanted to support it. So there's just a lot of things like, and my main gripe with City Skylines, with Colossal Order, with Paradox is that they don't really seem to care about players who maybe want more realism. Like most of their new DLCs and new features, like for example, there's lots of like new buildings, new vehicles, but in terms of the core game, they don't make many improvements to it. Like they could very easily sell a make Traffic Manager an official DLC and then support it officially, and that would really make things easier for players who like realism, but they don't do that. They're also in and they also don't want to improve the AI. And the excuse given by, I think, Colossal Orders, social media people, is that, oh, and stronger AI would not be fair for people with weak computers and console players, and which is a bullshit excuse, because obviously, like, if you can just make it an option, like you don't have to. You can integrate something into the game without making it mandatory. So yeah, anyway, that's my rant, which there will be more. I haven't talked in a video in a long time. So yeah. So anyway, this particular city. The name of this particular city is called No Cross Town, and the reason is this city contains very few, almost no pedestrian crossings. The way Now, one of the things I wish that we could do in the game is that we could just click on a crossing and then delete it from the game. But since we can't do that, and I'm sure there's a way to delete pedestrian crossings, but I haven't found it yet. So the way I've achieved this is by creating a custom road where I deleted the pedestrian paths. So as you can see, this section of road right here on the left has a pedestrian path, and then on the right it does not have a pedestrian path. And so by joining these two roads together in the asset editor, I can create an intersection where pedestrians are not allowed to cross the intersection. And that's very good because it prevents the problem of cars hitting pedestrians, pedestrians hitting cars. And it also, which makes for like smoother traffic, and also it's easier on the eyes, and it also allows me to construct the main arterial road, the main road, the main roads that go through this town, which are these north, south, and east-west roads that exit and enter the city. Um, so access in and out of the city and travel within the city is conducted entirely on these roads, which are relatively high speed. Like, I know I've set them to 50 kilometers an hour, but for whatever reason, maybe because my computer is relatively fast, or maybe because my mind just perceives things slower, but 50 kilometers an hour in the game feels like 50 miles an hour to my perception. So that's why I set things to 50 kilometers an hour. So traffic mainly moves through the city at 50 miles an hour on this mainline arterial road, and this is a controlled access highway, so it's got lots of at-grade intersections, but it is controlled access, so we don't have like people barging in trying to cross the highway while cars are crossing it at 50 miles an hour. And it also, there's a thing I want from Traffic Manager that it currently, I don't think it does offer, and it is a traffic light that alternates between, a two-way yield or two-way stop and allowing pedestrians to cross. So right now, the only way to stop pedestrians from crossing a street is to set up the traffic light to have the pedestrian lights be red. So as you can see, we're now at the cycle where let's just say north and south streets are green, while the north entrance is green, and our pedestrians are red. They can't cross. And this is the only way to prevent pedestrians from crossing the road without resorting to the thing where I edit the road to delete the pedestrian road. But I think there are many places that probably have this kind of traffic light where it alternates between all green for pedestrians and red for cars, and then after the pedestrian cycle ends, it goes to, yellow, so caution for the main road, flashing yellow, caution for the main road, and then flashing red, which is a stop sign for the side roads. And this means that you get both the efficiency of a two-way stop, because any car can cross the road as long as there's no other traffic, and you get the safety of protecting pedestrians from being on the same cycle as the cars. But since we don't have that, so by preventing pedestrians from crossing this road, we can keep it exclusively cars only, and make every road a two-way yield, the way this road is set up, without worrying about pedestrians entering the highway. At the the biggest intersection in this city is the roundabout at the town center. So we have this roundabout properly configured where inside lanes can exit directly, and it's very efficient. And this is the way to maximize the efficiency of a roundabout, the way you use a roundabout in real life. This is also how you're supposed to use a roundabout in real life. And the way you do this is by maintaining your relative position, so keeping ahead of the cars in the right lane, so that if this car wants to exit, this car just has to stay in front of this car or this car, and it will be able to exit without crashing into the cars on the right lanes, at least theoretically. And that's also why it's important for cars in the right lane to observe the rule to not pass on the right. Because if a car in the right lane is trying to pass on the right, and a car in the left lane doesn't anticipate that and tries to exit, then there will be a crash. But anyway, so if you use Traffic Manager to set up the lane arrows like this, you'll have a very well functioning roundabout. If you just leave it on the default setting where you'll have the right lane be exit only, the middle lane be an option lane, so the middle lane will be right or straight on, and then the left lane will be straight on only, then your roundabout will be much less efficient, and you'll very likely jam up the whole roundabout, and that will cause, if you're using, disable despawn, which is another thing that I want integrated into the base game. It's very easy to do, but somehow they're just Paradox, Colossal, they're just refusing to add this to the base game. But if you disable despawn and you have a stock roundabout with the automatic arrows, then your roundabout will jam up much easier. As you can see right now, even though everything's moved flowing super slowly because that's the way I have them set up. Like I don't like cars turning at 50 miles an hour. This turn, it's a turn, a 90-degree turn at a typical intersection, you take it at about 10, 15 miles an hour at the most. So that's the way I have it set up. And despite this, this roundabout will likely never jam up because of the way the exit arrows are, the arrows are configured inside the roundabout. So what else do I want to talk about? So entrance to the city is conducted on just a nice two-lane, undivided two-lane highway. Um, there are some sharp turns here. They're not intended to be, they're not part of the city. So I'm not worrying about trying to like, you could easily change these into smooth curves, but I don't want to deal with that. So I always feed into the entrances, which are fed by a three-lane highway that enters and exits, so that I don't know how City Skylines decides whether a which highways feed and feed into or feed from a city. For example, this city is well, I guess they're trying to cross the city, but this guy is leaving to go to Springfield, quote unquote Springfield. So I don't know how the game decides whether this entrance and this exit both go to Springfield, or whether the exit goes to Springfield and the entrance comes from some other city. But the way, if you set it up like this, then any car that wants to exit, that enters from here and wants to exit there, will just directly exit. The nice thing about not having traffic lights is that it gives you that very rural, low density feel to your roads. So not only is the city that there are no interchanges with multiple grades, so no bridges, no overpasses in this city at all. Um, in terms of walkability, it's not great, but it really is split into two parts. So the outside edge of the city, so people on this road, they can sort of, if someone in this house wants to get there, they would have to walk over here, follow this pedestrian path over here, and then cross on this pedestrian crossing, which is one of the few functioning pedestrian crossings in the game. So one thing I think is important about pedestrian crossings, and one thing I hate about some pedestrian crossings that, like a typical pedestrian crossing that's right at the intersection, is that if you are a person trying to cross it, you have to look behind you, to the left, forward, to the right, and that just makes it very dangerous and not safe, and that just makes things difficult for everyone. So instead, if you put the crossing out away from an intersection, then all you have to do is look left and right. And then approaching cars also have less things to worry about, and they can, if they spot you, they'll stop and you can cross. So those are the few places I've put pedestrian crossings on. They're only at in the middle of roads and not near any intersections, which is good. I've also turned on realistic parking, the realistic parking feature of Traffic Manager. So in order to provide enough parking spaces, we have these giant parking lots. So walkability in this city is not great. We just have the only part of the city that's really walkable is the outside edge. So for example, if you're a child living here and you want to get to the elementary school here, there's no way to do it without involving a taxi, which I think, according to the game files, is only like the richest children will occasionally hail a taxi, but which is weird because kids shouldn't be able to take a taxi on their own. But anyway, um, that's just how the game's set up. So there is no good way for someone here to get here without a car. But the thing about my designs is I like personal cars, so I don't really care. Um, we have enough road capacity that it's not really an issue if everyone has to use a car. Right now I've got the population balance mod set up, which is why I like all of the houses here are single grid houses. It's because with the population mod, um, it doesn't matter how big your house is, it will always only contain one, how big a low density house is, it will always only contain one household. So for example, if I delete these houses and then replace them with a single 4-grid house, it'll still only contain one household. And that's not good for the capacity of this city. All the speeds in this city are pretty well set up. So with the side roads, the entrances are set at 10 miles an hour, and this exit is set at 20 miles an hour. The rest are set at 10 miles an hour, and it's okay to set the exits a bit faster just to expedite cars exiting, because I would rather cars exit than clip through another car, which is something that there is no solution for in City Skylines. So in City Skylines, you can, one of the great things theoretically that you can have in City Skylines is huge traffic jams. You know, they're pain in real life, but they can be fun to, you know, set up a city, create a big traffic jam and then try to solve it. But it's not realistic because City Skylines doesn't officially support the disabled despawn feature. So in the stock game, if we have a traffic jam and a car waits for too long, it'll start, if there's a line of cars at a intersection or in a traffic jam and they're waiting for too long, they'll gradually start despawning, so they'll start self-deleting, and that'll allow your traffic to keep moving even though if they didn't magically disappear, then your gridlock would, so that's City Skylines' way of resolving literal gridlock. So for example, if this roundabout is completely filled and to the point where no car has room to move forward, the disabled despawn will help mitigate this deficiency in the AI by deleting a car so that the rest of the cars can move ahead and continue on to their destination. But the problem is there's another feature in the AI, is that if a line of cars is stopped for too long, a car will occasionally nudge forward. Like even if there's a car ahead of it, it'll just nudge forward and clip through all the cars ahead and then cross through. You can see this in some of my other videos. I have some old videos of City Skylines where I've created this phenomenon by having a huge traffic jam. And the problem with this is that it discourages me from using traffic lights. Like these intersections right here, they are like pretty big intersections, right? We have three lanes of, you know, it's an intersection between two 6-lane roads. So it looks like the kind of intersection that you would want to put a traffic light on, but the problem is, if you put a traffic light on it, you'll have to, and then if you want the most efficient cycle, which, so, and inefficient, so right now the way traffic lights are set up here is that the cycles are very inefficient. So we have 3 seconds of protected light for each lane, for each entrance, and then about 5 seconds of permissive movement where you are allowed to cross. You are allowed to make a left turn as long as there's no oncoming traffic, and then we have 3 more seconds of protected turn for the opposite side. And then we turn red for 3 seconds, which will allow any cars already in the intersection to vacate it before we start the next round of movement. And then after that, 3 more seconds, and then we let the pedestrians cross. Now, in real life, you would want to maybe make the traffic cycles a bit longer because all of the so if we look at the traffic light cycles here, so all the 3 seconds of red lights here, that's wasted time. So for example, as a proportion of the amount of green lights available, if you have longer green lights, then the red lights take a smaller proportion of the time, and your intersection will be overall more efficient. But the problem is, if you try to set up a traffic light cycle that, for example, maybe takes 60 seconds to cycle through a cycle, by the time it hits the 30th second, a impatient car will clip through the car front and then cross the intersection, and then that just doesn't look good. So it's not that I don't like efficiency isn't everything. Like if I only cared about efficiency, there are lots of things that you wouldn't want to if you only cared about efficiency, you wouldn't care if a car had to clear 4 lanes of traffic to make a left turn, or clear 6 lanes of traffic before crossing a road. And for someone who cares about realism, I would rather put a traffic light on here than allow cars to have to, because the AI isn't perfect, and honestly, like in real life, there are lots of accidents coming from a busy. I mean, this road doesn't look too busy right now because it's 4 a.m. on a Saturday, and I also have the real-time mod on, so that's the rush hour mod. So right now at night there's not a lot of traffic, but during the daytime there's a bit more traffic, and cars will just barge in. Now the AI, because when to cross is determined, they have a bit better judgment, so they're going to cross in situations where it's plausible that the accident could have been avoided. If there's an accident, it's plausible that there won't be an accident. But with people, people are imperfect and inconsistent. So, which is why if we have a road like this in real life, we would probably have a cycle of lights where the main line gets maybe 60 seconds, and then the light turns red, and then the side streets get maybe like 15 seconds, and then alternate between those two. And then if you want to allow pedestrians to cross in real life, the pedestrians might, people who like to walk might talk to their local government and say, hey, I would like to cross this road, and then they'll also add in a pedestrian cycle, and then that'll add even more time, but then that will cause cars to start doing the thing I described, where a line of cars waiting at a light for 60 seconds will, the car behind it will get impatient, and it'll just move ahead and clip through the cars waiting ahead of it, and then barge into the intersection. And if I had to choose between that and allowing these 6-lane two-way yields, I'd rather a 6-lane two-way yield than to have cars clipping through each other at a signalized intersection. So you might have noticed that we have a lot of emergency vehicles, but the only emergency cars we have are these Lambo cops. And the reason is because all emergency vehicles just drive at super fast speeds, and I don't think it's very immersion breaking to see anything other than a sports car, drive at these fast speeds and take corners at the high speeds, and that's why I downloaded this Lambo mod, and that's why the only Mercy vehicles I have active are these Lamborghinis, are these cop cars. So yeah, this game is not like, as you can see here. I always use infinite money because a lot of the designs, like a lot of my designs are inspired by American designs, which are very inefficient, low density designs that are only economically allowed because of huge, because America is very rich, and a lot of our roads are subsidized federally, and these are designs that might not necessarily work in a less wealthy country. So if that's why I have infinite money. Now right now it looks like my city's doing pretty good fiscally, but that's because in the process of editing these stock roads, after removing the traffic lights and changing the default speed to half of the um, stock speed. So I think in the stock game, this road does like 50 kilometers an hour, and I changed it to by default do 20 kilometers an hour, which is just it just makes editing the roads easier because I still have to customize the speed limits in the process of um, putting this city together. But in the process, I also halved the maintenance, construction, purchase costs. So I just don't want to go through the process of managing the finances of the city. Like, it's a lot of what determines whether a city's finances works or not. The game simulates some of it, but it doesn't simulate a big federal or state government stealing tax dollars from a big city nearby to subsidize your small town, which is something that and I think small towns are charming. I would like to make more small towns in the game, and or not even like just small cities like by global standards. And like just as a side note, I'm not saying that it's bad to subsidize rural areas because obviously they in return they give us if we didn't have subsidized interstates passing through places that no one lives there, then shipping with truck shipping would take much longer, um, and we wouldn't have food would be more expensive if rural infrastructure wasn't subsidized. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that's a reality that isn't simulated by City Skylines, a game made by Europeans. Um, yeah. So what else? So yeah, one thing I think that you can intuitively understand, but I'll talk about it anyway, is getting cars to choose the main road. And the way to do this is because cars choose the route they take by the speed, by the shortest time. So not by distance, but by the quickest route. So if you set a speed limit on the main road to be very high, and then the speed limit on the side roads to be very low, then you'll motivate the cars to take the main road. And you don't want cars in side road because sometimes side roads are just very fragile, have very fragile intersections which will get completely overwhelmed by a large amount of traffic. Meanwhile, we have this very high capacity, well, relatively high capacity roundabout here in the center that can take a huge amount of traffic. So while most of the city's intersections do not have functioning crosswalks, I mean, I know that in real life you would just cross it anyway if one's looking, but you're not supposed to. And but while most of the city does not have functioning crosswalks, the city core does is the only exception, and the city core is also the only place that has these traffic lights, which I showed off earlier. And as you can see, the city core, while most of my intersections have 3 incoming lanes, um, at these signalized traffic intersections we only have 2 lanes. They are made primarily to be walkable. We don't expect there to be any amount of traffic, and the reason we don't expect there to be any amount of traffic is because all of the incoming and outgoing roads that directly feed into them have limits of 10 kilometers an hour, 10 miles an hour. So that means that the AI won't choose to pass through this area unless absolutely necessary. I mean, there's also a policy in for the region that you can set, I think it's called Old Town, where only residents and businesses can use the area for motor vehicles, but that would require, that would require deselecting creating extra regions because the central arterial, we would have to have 4 separate regions without interfering with the arterial, which has to be available for everyone to use. So as you can see with the city, it's mostly a mid-density city, so it's not a low-density because we obviously have, buildings that aren't like 1 floor tall, but it's also not a high-density city because we have the policy active called high-rise ban. So the high-rise band allows the city to look more like a typical American city that doesn't have like super tall buildings. And it would make no sense for this kind of like, if the only kinds of cities that do have super tall buildings are kinds that would likely have interstate access and all things that this city doesn't have. So it does make sense to limit the height of the cities to make it look more believable. I mean, everything is symmetrical, which it's not. I mean, it is possible in one of the many flat plain areas that the United States and the rest of the world has. So this city is not. It's plausible. Like if the government could just seize or buy a huge amount of land, the government could just replicate a city in this way. Um, so what else do I want to talk about? So yeah, this city, it looks like a single unit, but it's divided into 4 separate quadrants, and pedestrians aren't able to cross from here to here. If they want to cross from here to here, they'll have to drive or get a cab, which the city has, or take a bus, which I haven't set up yet, and I don't think I will set up because I don't think it's necessary, at least in terms of making the game work. I'm sure that if we had such a city in real life, pedestrians will want some way to cross the road. But without a pedestrian, but by keeping pedestrians from crossing this intersection, it allows traffic through it to flow very smoothly. So yeah, let's look. So all of the most of the required buildings, so the mandatory buildings such as education, police, fire department, I've made custom. I've edited them to increase their range. So as you can see, we have about 1, 2, 3, 6 clinics that cover almost a whole map. Like well, no, I mean 2 clinics that are able to cover this entire, I think, north-south section. I mean, here's a small gripe with the game. the sun rises from the west in this game. Like somehow this is such a giant oversight, and they just missed that. So if you go on a website, the website Terrain Party, and you take a snapshot of terrain data of a region that you want to make a city on, and then you import it into the game without rotating the map 180 degrees, the sun will rise from the west. And that's something that, again, the devs just haven't bothered to fix. So yeah, we don't have full coverage of the city, but the game is very gamey. Like in the vanilla game, everything has to be pretty much operating at 100% efficiency in order to be sustainable, and that's not a fun way to play. Like if you want to, if your only goal is to play it as a game, if you just want to get higher score, then the vanilla game is fine. But if you want to create, maybe recreate a realistic design, if you want to maybe try out some new things that aren't necessarily the most efficient thing to do, but you want to see it, then you're gonna need to get creative with, uh, become a bit more flexible with the limitations of the game, and use infinite money, and make a custom asset that increases the range and decreases the effect. If you don't want to like micromanage the amount of education, the amount of services available to your citizens, to your sims. So yeah, in terms of improvements, the city can be improved in a few ways. For example, at least in the city, you could easily, like realistically speaking, if you had a city like this, like it would be very easy to justify it in the budget to add a small pedestrian tunnel, so that the city isn't divided into 4 quadrants. At least the city core, to keep the city core from being divided into 4 quadrants. That's an easy thing to do. If I get the new DLC, I will be able to add a intercity bus line, I think, which will be good because I'm so tired of like having to build airports, which have super short unrealistic runways, or cruise ships, which are worse, or rail, which is expensive and not realistic for many towns. So yeah, by there is some good stuff that is probably in a new DLC, but I mean, we'll see. So yeah, I think right now I'll speed up the time so that we can see what this city looks like in a day. Hold on. There's a sunrise with a lovely sunrise. Tremendous. That kind of impression. Alright, let's slow the time back down. So I think some things about the city, like because they're just cops are the only things active in the city, because I've turned off fires. I've turned off sick people. So the city just looks like a police state. And frankly, there are too many cops, like with sirens. And that's another gripe I have with the game is that I would like to reduce the frequency of cops. You know, it's good for the game, but it's not good for realism. Like in the vanilla game, traffic has to flow at pretty much 99% flow, or else a cop or a fire truck or an ambulance has about 5 seconds to get to the emergency before bad things start to happen, which is unrealistic. You know, in most actual fires, I think fires and crimes, it depends, but most of them have a bit higher tolerance for time. So this crime stuff is interesting, but I don't think it's the most realistic thing you can have in your um in your game. Oh, right. I also have this nice roundabout bush that looks like um that blocks the view from this angle, but allows you to see to the far edge from this angle. And we can also use so I've turned off bicycles. I've banned bicycles from the sidewalks. And in real life, I think bicycles should be allowed on the sidewalks, but I've banned them in the game. And this also prevents collisions because it's far less likely for people, like you can't, if they collide or clip through each other, you can't even see it. But basically, bicycles clip through each other much easier, and that's the only reason why I've banned. Well, the other reason is because I want to increase traffic, and I do want to kind of see this infrastructure stressed a bit to its limit, but it won't happen at 30k, at a population of 30k. Ever notice how because of this COVID thing, all of a sudden, no one is talking about how great trains are, how great public transportation is? I think people realize that, the thing that gives you personal space, personal space is nice to have when there isn't a pandemic, but it can be life-saving when there is a pandemic. So we'll just go over a few more glamour shots, or whatever. You know what, let's take a look at things from this angle. Cities, like, I rag on city skylines and colossal order and paradox a lot, and it pains me because nothing else, no other city builder on the market even comes close to city skylines. And so they don't need to improve. They can just keep selling, content, DLCs, and do very little to improve the base game. Yeah, so these are my custom malls, custom Supreme malls. I think in the stock game, the default mall is called Grand Mall. So yeah, the Supreme Mall is better because it has parking lots. It has lots of parking spaces outside and on the inside. All of my custom assets in the game have just, the biggest change, in addition to just cheating in like positive effects and low costs, is just tons of parking spaces. Like that merge is absolutely terrible. And oh yeah, that's an area I want to gripe about is, you know, cars in the game. Like it's like I think that if you wanted to redo the traffic physics to make it better, you would just set a g-force limit that applies to all, turns and acceleration, deceleration, and merge and changing lanes. So right now cars can just, they could be going 100 kilometers an hour and change lanes in a second, which is not realistic. If you try to do that, I think in real life you'll flip the car or lose traction, or I mean it just won't be good. But cars in this game can just change lanes instantly. But yeah, with the new track manager, I do like some of the improvements they made. So they do have this thing where cars in a roundabout are forced to stay in their lane until they get out. Um, I guess they figured out how to detect roundabouts. Um, I would still like to set separate policies for. Um, I would like to first save like policies to apply to all new games, so that I don't have to reset these options with each new file. And I would also like to define whether a cars are allowed to enter blocked junctions, or have to follow priority rules at each individual like zone. So for example, you know, defining these rules based on districts, for example. And it's just a small thing, but I still haven't figured out um, add how to use like assets like yield signs. I found yield signs and stop signs on the Steam Workshop, but I still haven't figured out how to put them in game. And I'm sure there's a way, but right now, I think intuitively people understand that side roads have to yield to the main road. Um, but it would be a bit more fuzzy because the way I have things set up is that these roads have to yield to the road that connects directly to the main road. But I would like to see yield signs. And the reason I'm using yield signs instead of stop signs is because it seems to me, at least from my previous observations, I don't know if things have improved in this new version of Traffic Manager, but in my previous observations, it seems that cars, vehicles yield better with yield signs instead of stop signs. Like with a stop sign, I think cars will more frequently just stop and then just barge in, even if there's other traffic on the road. Anyway, my throat is starting to hurt bad. I think I've pretty much shown everything I can of this city. So thanks for watching. Bye!